So now that you understand the basics of creating a multi-node swarm and creating overlay networks and Docker services, we're going to cover the next really cool thing about Swarm, which is stacks. Not stacks of pancakes, but stacks of services. And in 1.13, Docker added this really great feature that adds another layer of abstraction on top of stacks. And basically, it's compose files for production Swarm. So now stacks accept compose files. Inside there is what we would call a declarative definition, where we're stating this is what I want the end result to be, and it's the Swarm's job to figure all that out. And now it's not just services, it's networks and volumes as well. And a little sneak peek, it's actually going to include secrets, which we'll talk about in the next few lectures. We get to use a new command, which is docker stack deploy, to import this compose file and run the commands that we put in it. The stack manages all of this. It doesn't need us to go and first create networks or first create volumes, but we can totally do that. We can use something called external in our compose file to say, hey, these are already things that exist in my swarm. Go ahead and use those. Don't bother creating them. But usually you end up having your stacks just doing it all for you because it's easier that way. We're going to get some new features in our compose file. So we're going to start with ones that look very similar to what we had before, but we're going to get this new deploy key in there, or dictionary, that allows us to specify the things that are specific to Swarm. How many replicas do we want? What do we want to do when we fail over? How do we want to do rolling updates? And all the sorts of things that we wouldn't care about on our local development machine. But that comes at a price, which is that we can't do the build command yet. And that maybe is something that will never happen in Swarm, because the mindset here is that building shouldn't happen on your production Swarm. Building is something that your CI system should do, maybe Jenkins or something else like CodeShip. Then once you've built your images and put them in your repository, this stack will actually be the one to pull down those images and deploy them with the deploy options. The good news there, though, is that they actually get along. So on your local machine, Compose will actually ignore, when you run the docker-compose command, it'll actually ignore any of the deploy information. And it'll actually say, hey, you've got deploy information in here. I can't really use it, so I'm going to ignore it. But likewise, when you're on Swarm and you're deploying a new stack or an update to a stack, it'll actually say, hey, you've got build commands in here. I don't do builds, so I'm going to ignore them and keep going. So the nice thing is you don't have to change your file. And we'll see later how we can actually have a single compose file that does everything that we needed to do on the development side and on the production deployment side. It's pretty cool. And finally, you don't actually need the Docker Compose CLI, the binary. That doesn't need to be in your Swarm. Because again, Compose, the actual command, is not a production tool. It wasn't designed to be production. It was designed to be a developer and sysadmin helper tool. It's really best for local work on our machines. So the Swarm, which is basically the Docker engine now can accept compose files using that stack command. It reads the compose files without needing Docker Compose anywhere on the server. Let's review real quick. When we look back at our services, this is what our service would look like. We would create a service, let's say it's Nginx, and let's say we specified 3 replicas of it. So it would then go and create 3 tasks in the orchestrator, and those tasks would find certain servers or nodes to put them on, and they would create containers. So in the new stacks, we're talking about multiple services, one or more, right? You can have dozens of services in there in that single YAML file. They act just like the services that we had before, only now we get to do volumes and overlay networks in that compose file, and that results in what we would call a stack. And a stack controls all those things, and it actually will put its name properly on all the objects so that you can easily tell which ones are related to which stack. It'll actually put labels in there as well, which we'll cover later, which is more metadata for you to be able to determine what stack this particular thing came from. So this is really great. We now get to use a YAML file to actually do all those things we didn't want to have to type in the service commands, because the service commands were already kind of getting unwieldy and long. And then we ended up making bash scripts in order to run those commands, and then it just got tedious, right? So now that we've had Swarm around for 8 months, we now get this stack feature that manages those services. Now, notice that the stack is only for one swarm, right? It can't do many swarms. It's only going to be running on one swarm. So that it can control all the nodes and deploy all these services, networks, and volumes. Now, I should say that this diagram can actually have one more thing in it, which is secrets, because the stack can control those as well, but we'll see that in a later lecture in this section. Okay, so let's look at the stacks and how they work. I'm back on my 3-node swarm that we built earlier, and I'm going to maximize the window on node 1 because I don't really need the other 2 nodes. At least I don't need their SSH command line. And we're going to use the voting app example we did in the previous lectures for this section. If you remember our design for that, it was 5 different services, and they all had dependencies on each other, and it ultimately gave us 2 different websites. You went through, and I'm sure you crafted the best services list with all the values and options that it needed, and it was perfect, right? Well, I'm here to tell you that now that is no longer needed. It was really important for us to use them, and not everything is going to need a stack file. But now I have a stack file. Let's just take a peek at it real quick, because you'll notice that it looks very much like a compose file, because it is. The only real key thing you have to change is it has to be at least version 3 or higher. The latest version right now is version 3.1, but I'm sure that will change as it continues to change and mature. But you need version 3 in order to use stacks. You'll notice that we have our Redis and our DB and our Vote and all these things that are probably very similar to you from your own work. And you're probably very familiar with those and the images they need and the ports they need open and all that. But in this case, you'll notice deploy. Deploy here is a new option. You'll see here that I'm specifying how many replicas I want, which is how many copies of that image that need to run at a time, and what happens when I do an update. So when I do an actual stack update, which will then do service updates, how do I want that to roll out, right? Do I want them to all go down at the same time? Do I only want one at a time? How much delay between them? There's all sorts of options here. We're just kind of scratching the surface. But you can see, like, I have a restart policy here that if the container fails, automatically restart it. You can see down here under the database, I've actually had constraints put in to make sure that it's on a specific node. And we haven't talked really a lot about constraints yet, but there are ways for us to label objects, that is containers or images or really anything that we can create or destroy in Swarm or in Docker itself. We can actually assign labels to any of those, including nodes. And a node that is a manager gets its own labels, and this is very easy for us to do, to just say, hey, this container has to run on a node that has this particular role. Great example there. As we scroll down, we've got some parallelism options, which we've seen before. This delay option is pretty cool. If you have sort of a warm-up time when you have containers that spin up, maybe they've started, but they don't actually go live for maybe 60 seconds or something, you can add in delays there. We'll actually look at those later during production blue-green deployments. But for now, you can see these are all pretty standard. We've actually got even more options down here. You can actually see that I assign this a specific label. I have a window and a max attempt for restart policies. So if it tries to restart and it continues to fail, it's not going to try more than 3 times. Let's check it out. So all I got to do is do a docker stack deploy -c for compose, because we want to use a compose file. Then I'm going to call it vote app. And there we go. Now, it didn't actually create everything and spin it up that fast. All it did was create those objects in the scheduler, which will then go through the process of creating the services, which then create the tasks, which then create the containers. It also has to create the networks, as you'll see here. Remember, we had the front end and the back end, so it created those, as well as a default network, which that particular stack file that I had was using a default network. And then you'll see this option for visualizer, which is a new one we did not use before, and we'll see that in a minute. So let's take a look at the docker stack command a little more. You'll see that we can deploy. We've done that already. And then we have an ls, a ps, an rm, and services. So this command doesn't have a whole lot of features to it. It's pretty simple because all of the functionality is really in the compose file and really in the objects it's creating. And since we've done all that already, we can do things like ls, which just shows us all of our stacks. It's a pretty basic command, and we only have the one. And then if I do a PS, it actually shows me, oops, I gotta specify the name, vote. It's called vote app. Gotta get that right. Okay. And then let me back that up so that you can see that a little better. Right there, these are the actual tasks, and you can see which node they're running on. It's not actually the containers, it's actually the tasks that we're seeing here. Because if it was the actual container, we would see a big long name. Because if you remember, the services we created earlier, they had these really long names if we actually went and did a Docker PS, right? If I did a Docker container ls or a Docker PS, you get these really long names. And that's because they all get a GUID, because every container's got to be uniquely named. And so that's how they guarantee that they're always unique and never collide. And then the last one here is Docker stack services VODAP. I like this one the best, actually, because it shows me my replicas. It's kind of like doing a service ls. It shows me how many replicas I have started, so I know whether I've got the proper number of containers already started. And then if I want to dive deeper, then I could do a Docker stack PS. We actually get the task names here, and we see what nodes they're running on. So these two together actually give you a complete picture of how this entire application is running. If I wanted to dive into the networking, I could do a Docker network ls, just like we normally would do. And you can see these 3 new overlay networks that were created for this app. And notice that the app name is always at the beginning. The stack always precedes the name of the service. So each stack will make sure that its name is at the front. And then let's go check it out. Let me bring up my browser. All right, we can see that on port 5000, I've got the voting site running. If I go to 5001, I've got the results site, so I can hit this and then see the result. And then this new one we have is called a visualizer. That's on 8080. And the visualizer is actually a pretty neat tool for demonstration purposes. It's actually made, all this is made by Docker, by the way. And these are all an open source repo that you can see in the resources section of this section. And so we've got different colors for each service. So the VODAP result is a green, and then the Redis is kind of a mustardy, and the vote is a pink. You can see there's 2 votes, and there's 2 Redises. It's pretty great to kind of show what happens as things move around the swarm. If I actually went into my file and did a change, so let's go to the voting app, and let's say we want to change the replicas to 5. We could go and update the service, but that's kind of an anti-pattern. If we go in and type manually commands into the service, like Docker service update, that would mean that the next time I reapply this YAML file, it's going to overwrite those changes. So if you've ever done CloudFormation in AWS or any other configuration management, you know that once you're using a config file like this to manage your infrastructure, you really want to always use this file because it's going to be the source of truth. So it probably in production would be some sort of file that you keep in a Git repository that you have version control on, and you control changes, and that way you can roll back changes. In this case, I'm just going to change that file real quick, and we're going to run the same command, docker stack deploy. Notice we don't have an update because we're going to deploy to the same stack, and it's going to recognize that it's existing and that we're going to update it based on these changes. So in order to update it, we got to make sure we use the right name. So it's VODAP. And then notice that it's saying updating services. It recognizes that it needs to change them. And then if we go over to our visualizer, you can see that we've already got it. We're just too slow today, aren't we? We're not able to keep up with the swarm. So we've got now 5 of these voting apps already running. If they took a while to run and launch, we would actually see their states change in here as they came online. But it's a simple web app, so it's going to start up pretty quickly. Okay, that's stacks. Now let's add on the secrets to our stacks. All right, so a new feature in 113.1 was full support for secrets. If I had to create a tagline of what this is, it's basically the easiest secure solution for storing secrets in Swarm. I say it's the easiest because it's built into Swarm, it comes out of the box, and there's nothing you need to do to use it. As long as you've initialized your Swarm and you're on version 113 or newer, you've got secrets. I say it's secure because it's designed from the ground up to be encrypted on disk, to be encrypted in transit, and to only be available to the places it needs to be. And that's really what we need. So what is a secret? A secret in this case is classifying anything that you don't want on the front page of a newspaper. If it got on the front page and you had to go change it, that's a secret. It's a username or password. It's a TLS certificate or the keys to that. It's an SSH key. It's a Twitter API key. It's an Amazon key. It's anything that you need to allow connectivity between stuff is probably a secret, and you should be protecting it. So until now, we haven't had a lot of great options for Swarm. Now, there's definitely lots of options out there like Vault and other great tools for storing secrets, but they weren't built in and they required a separate infrastructure set up just so that you could even start using them. So we can store in here anything that's a string or a binary up to 0.5 meg in size. And the coolest part about this is it doesn't actually require your app to be rewritten in order to use it. You don't have to have your app talk to a web service somewhere else in order to get these. So let's see how it works. As of 1.13.0, the Swarm WRAP database is encrypted on disk by default. If you install Docker and do a Swarm init like we've done before, that's an encrypted database. And when it shuts down the service, it's encrypted with the keys stored securely. It's only stored on the disk of the manager nodes, and they're the only ones that have the keys to unlock it or decrypt it. This is all already existing in Swarm, but basically the way that the keys get down to the containers is through the control plane or the encrypted TLS network communications between the managers and the workers. And that connection was already secure. It already used TLS and mutual PKI authentication. So it was a great way to use that existing channel for bringing these secrets down to our containers. The way we get them around is we actually first put them into the Swarm database using Docker secrets commands, and then we assign them to the services, whether we use the service commands themselves or a stack file to tell Swarm who's allowed to use this secret. The key here is that just because there's a container on a host or on a node and you've assigned the key to that service doesn't mean other containers can get access to it. Since this is built into the Docker engine, the Docker worker keeps that key secure in memory only and only gives it down to the containers on that node that needs them. Now, how they're presented in the file system to the container is it looks like a file on the hard drive to your apps inside the container. But it's not actually that. They're not actually running on disk. They're in memory only using a RAMFS file system, and you'll get to them underneath the /run/secrets directory, where it'll by default be the name that you gave the secret as a file, and then when you just access that file, you'll see the one secret that's in it. So if you think of this as like a key value store, the key is the name of the file, and the value is what's in it. We can also set up aliases, so we can have multiple names for the same key, and we'll see how that comes into play later. For local development, if you're using a stack file that has secret assignments in it, it will actually work in Docker Compose on your local machine. Now again, Docker Compose, the command line, should never be used in production on a production server. In this case, in particular, it's actually faking security. So what's happening is we really want the Docker developer or the Docker user on their machine to be able to use these stack files as much as possible. So the containers that you run on your local machine will actually see the secrets just like they would in Swarm, but we don't have Swarm on our local machine unless we initialize it there, which most people aren't going to do. And the way we store the secrets is in the Swarm database. So this may be kind of obvious to you, but secrets depends on Swarm. It's a Swarm-only thing. If you don't have Swarm, you can't use secrets. However, the Docker Compose command has a workaround where it actually mounts the secrets in a clear text file into the local container. Now, that's not secure, but it does allow us to use secrets locally on our machine. It's just not something that you would want to use in production, which is why we have the secure store for Swarm.